Adam Schiff didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table. He didn't deliver some fiery speech that drifted into the air like political theater. Instead, he did something far more unsettling. He looked directly at Pam Bondi, waited for the room to quiet down, and in the calmest tone possible asked the one question no attorney general ever wants aimed at them. Why won't you answer anything? That moment landed so sharply that even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Because it wasn't what Schiff said that captured the room, it was what Bondi refused to say. And over the next few minutes, the silence around her became a story all on its own.
The president's top deportation official, working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly, you know.
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you know,
I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether he took the money?
All I know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
and,
was she,
Senator Schiff, if you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured by Congress for lying with your
we can stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
But what we're interested in,
borders are.
What we're interesed in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You want your,
so
no,
you were asked by my colleague. You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Homan taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you support?
You don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is not my decision. I said you can talk to Director Patel.
You don't have to try to.
You think you've got a gotcha with Tom Homan, our borders are.
Excuse me.
Who's been out there fighting for our country since Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed I believe the American people, should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump for trying to impeach him?
I guess the answer is you won't support that request.
After you now know that Joe Biden tried to cover up Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine.
Excuse me. Let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You were asked, law degree,
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
career. You can attack me later, and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day today.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be—
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
what
the current president—
What about the fires in California?
And
do you
this
care
is
about
supposed
that,
to be,
Senator
this is, excuse me, this is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about the
Are the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
When will it be
your entire career,
that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept—
Clearly you're a failed lawyer because you don't understand when someone can and cannot answer a question.
Refuse to accept personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander?
With
Will
that,
you apologize
Madam Chair,
to Donald Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator
may I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction into the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising an alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce, with unanimous consent, the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter for Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes by urging officials to do the right thing for the right reasons, to follow the facts and the law, and raises the alarm that the decision to remove experienced career officials from U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, and critical parts of DOJ undermines our country's abilities to counter terrorist organizations, malign nation-state actors, and countless others that seek to harm our nation and its citizens. And he believes that the priority is prosecuting the president's enemies
or are you admitting
rather
that?
than protecting the country.
One moment.
May I have unanimous consent
Are
to
you
enter
entering
these
that
into the record?
Without objection.
Thank you.
What people watching at home didn't immediately realize was that Schiff wasn't improvising. He wasn't venting. He wasn't trying to score political points. He was laying a trap, one built entirely out of her own evasions. Every time she tried to pivot, every time she dodged, every time she took a swing at a member of the committee instead of answering a direct question, she wasn't escaping anything. She was building the case he was about to read back to her. And when he finally began listing question after question she had refused to answer, the hearing shifted from policy to something closer to a forensic deconstruction. It felt less like oversight and more like an autopsy on the state of the justice system itself. Schiff started with what should have been the simplest issue of the whole day, whether she consulted career ethics lawyers before approving a massive foreign gift. That's the kind of question past attorneys general answered without blinking. But Bondi had offered nothing. No timeline, no documentation, not even a vague assurance that basic protocols had been followed. So Schiff read it aloud, slowly, precisely, as if every word weighed more than the one before, and because she still didn't respond, the silence that followed became more damning than any accusation he could have spoken. Then he moved to something even more explosive. He asked again who made the decision to flag a certain high-profile name inside the Epstein records gathered by federal investigators. This is the kind of thing the public cares deeply about: who gets flagged, who doesn't, and why. But Bondi had refused to acknowledge any involvement, any knowledge, anything at all. So Schiff didn't argue. He simply documented her refusal in real time, letting viewers hear for themselves what she wasn't willing to explain. He wasn't attacking her. He was cataloging the questions she was hiding from. It kept going. He reminded her that she refused to say whether a senior official had kept $50,000 in a bag, money tied to an alleged bribe. She wouldn't say whether taxes had been paid on it. She wouldn't say whether investigators recommended charges. She wouldn't say why the case vanished. This wasn't political back and forth. These were factual questions with legal implications, the kind that usually come with clear answers. But all they got was evasion, and Schiff didn't have to dramatize it. He just had to present it. By the time he listed her refusal to answer whether career prosecutors found insufficient evidence to charge a former FBI director, the room was so quiet you could hear paper settle. Bondi shifted in her seat, but she still didn't answer. Schiff didn't push. He didn't yell. He simply added it to the growing list. But the part that really told the story came when he reminded the room that she wouldn't explain how the military strikes carried out in the Caribbean were legally justified. Military actions usually require an underlying authority, something constitutional, statutory, or based on emergency powers. And most attorneys general relish an opportunity to talk about legal frameworks because it's one of the rare areas where the public actually wants detail. But instead of clarity, Bondi had dodged. Again. When Schiff read the question about whether she'd discussed indicting a former FBI director with the president, she looked visibly irritated. But irritation wasn't an explanation. Irritation wasn't transparency. Irritation wasn't accountability. So Schiff moved on, reminding her that she refused to say whether she approved the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with a major corporate merger. It's the kind of question that goes to the heart of whether the justice system is working independently or bending under pressure. The fact that she wouldn't answer said more than any heated exchange ever could. Then came the question that many in the room had been waiting for, whether she supported a restoration fund for the violent chaos that unfolded at the Capitol. The public had been demanding clarity on this for months. She gave none. She didn't answer when asked in the hearing, and she didn't answer when Schiff brought it back up. Another refusal. Another entry in his growing public record. But the turning point came when Schiff reminded her she wouldn't even answer if she was firing career prosecutors simply because they worked on investigations tied to January 6th. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't rumor. This was a direct question about whether people doing their jobs were being targeted. Bondi had evaded it, and the silence seemed to stretch across the room. Schiff wasn't done. He brought up one of the simplest questions of all, whether immigration officials must follow court orders. This is basic civics. This is foundational to the rule of law. But Bondi refused to answer even that. And it was in that moment that the atmosphere in the hearing shifted completely. It became clear that the hearing wasn't failing because the questions were flawed. It was failing because the answers were being withheld intentionally. What made Schiff's approach so effective was that he didn't preach. He didn't scold. He didn't call anyone names. He just walked through every unanswered question one by one, turning silence into evidence. And when Bondi tried to interrupt, when she tried to redirect, Schiff didn't react emotionally. He simply kept reading, reminding the country that oversight only works when those in power are willing to be held accountable. Then he did something that changed the entire frame of the hearing. He requested unanimous consent to enter a series of documents into the record. This might sound procedural, but it was actually the moment where the real meaning of Bondi's refusals became undeniable. First, Schiff asked to enter a statement from over 1,000 former Justice Department officials. These weren't pundits. These weren't activists. These were career prosecutors, national security lawyers, and investigators who had dedicated their lives to protecting the country. Their warning was simple but chilling: the department was drifting into dangerous territory, where decisions might be based on politics rather than law. When that many former officials sound the alarm, you don't have a political problem, you have an institutional crisis. Next, he introduced a letter signed by 282 former career. These were people who had either left voluntarily or been pushed out. Their message was equally stark. They believed that improper actions inside the department were undermining public trust, weakening the rule of law, and damaging the department's ability to function. For Schiff to bring that into the record wasn't just symbolic. It was a way of saying, this isn't just my concern, this is a concern shared by the people who built this institution. Then came the Justice Department manual. That might sound technical, but to anyone who understands DOJ, it was devastating. That manual outlines the exact conditions that make a prosecution illegitimate: political pressure, personal vendettas, interference from outside actors. By putting that manual next to Bondi's refusals, Schiff didn't have to accuse her of anything. The contrast did the work for him. He was essentially saying, here are the rules, and here are the questions you won't answer. But the most powerful moment came when he introduced the farewell letter from Michael Ben-Ari, a respected counter-terrorism prosecutor. In his letter, he warned that the removal of experienced career officials was weakening America's ability to counter threats from hostile groups and foreign adversaries. He didn't write it for cameras. He didn't write it for headlines. He wrote it because he believed the department was losing the expertise required to keep the country safe. For Schiff to put that letter into the record was an unmistakable message. These aren't isolated concerns. They're systemic. As all of this was happening, Bondi grew more tense, but she still didn't answer. She still didn't explain the foreign gift. She still didn't explain the $50,000. She still didn't explain the fired prosecutors. She still didn't explain the legal basis for military activity. She still didn't explain the flagged names and sensitive files. And by the time Schiff finished, the pattern was impossible to deny. The power of the hearing didn't come from what was said. It came from what wasn't. It came from the fact that the nation's top law enforcement officer wouldn't answer even the most basic questions about ethics, oversight, and legal authority. And because she refused to answer, Schiff turned her silence into a roadmap, one that future investigators could follow, one that journalists could build on, one that the public could judge for themselves. What people often forget is that oversight hearings aren't about theatrical arguments. They're about creating a record. They're about forcing sunlight into places where power tries to hide. And Schiff used all of that: procedure, documentation, tone, timing, to show exactly where the cracks in the system were forming. The deeper lesson of the hearing is simple: democracy doesn't fall apart in a single dramatic moment. It erodes through a pattern of unanswered questions. It weakens through silence where truth should be. It decays when officials choose loyalty to power over loyalty to law. You don't need dramatic confessions to see the problem. You just need to notice what happens when the questions get tough. Bondi's silence wasn't strength. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't caution. It was a signal that the department she leads may no longer be operating the way the public expects. And when an institution built on accountability refuses accountability, everything else starts to wobble. If this hearing showed anything, it's that the public has to pay attention, not to the arguments, but to the absences, not to the speeches, but to the silences. Because when the people in charge stop answering, that's when democracy needs its citizens the most. If you want more deep dive breakdowns, full hearings explained in plain language, an analysis that cuts through the noise, make sure you like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Your engagement keeps this channel alive, and your awareness keeps oversight alive. Stay informed.